Primed piece of TNT is a worrying sight. Although if you have an anvil, this might just save your life. See, since we can overlap the anvil onto the same block as the TNT entity, we can have the TNT explode inside of the anvil. And because the anvil has a high blast resistance, none of the blocks nearby will be destroyed.
When you think of mobs, you're probably picturing something like this, or this, but probably not this. Though when they were first added in back in the Java Edition survival test, they were just that. And initially, signs would only spawn by pressing the B key, at which point it would say the text, "This is a test of the sign, each line could be 15 characters.
If you've scrolled through your YouTube recommended, you've probably seen a bunch of videos pitching different features to Mojang. But while those usually go unanswered, there is the rare occasion of it working, since the entire reason that the terracotta blocks, then known as hardened clay, were added in is because of Blame the Controller's suggestion to Dinnerbone.
Finding a vein of ancient debris is cause for celebration, but if you were to find something like this, I don't think one celebration would cut it. But would you believe it, this site is theoretically possible, since up to 5 ancient debris could spawn in any given chunk, and 4 chunks could generate all of theirs at the border, giving us a 20-block blob and a new dream scenario.
Bedrock Edition famously handles some features differently to Java Edition, and while that can sometimes be groan-worthy, here it's just strange, since if we were to name our boats like so, then when placed, they present a name tag like any other mod. So if you really want to show off your fleet at the harbour, this might be the best way to do it.
When Mojang makes a change, they aren't always decisive, and sometimes that means a feature gets added in and then removed in a later update. But this seems particularly indecisive, because back in the InfDev stages of Minecraft, 4 updates in a row saw leaves change to not decay, decay, not decay, and then decay once again, which is quite the identity crisis, but luckily it's been solved. Would you believe me if I told you that Striders were fish? Well, looking at one now, that's a hard comparison to justify, though that might have changed during development. See, if we check the Striders texture file prior to snapshot 20W15A, they actually had a fin in the texture data, but since that update, the original file's been removed.
Some Minecraft features never see the light of day, and in this case it's a bit too true. See, when they were added in, amethyst clusters had an unused lit block state, and while that sounds cool, it must have been reconsidered by Mojang, as it was removed in snapshot 21W17A before it was even implemented, keeping both us and our amethyst geodes in the dark.
If you've been raiding bastions in the nether, then you know that it takes plenty of luck to find the pig step disc. But apparently, that's not the only rare pig step in the game, since as a snapshot 20W22A, piglins will occasionally dance after hoglin hunting. So if you're part of that lucky few who gets to see it, this will definitely establish you some dominance.
Breeding animals is an old tradition of Minecraft husbandry, but while most peaceful mobs can be bred under the right conditions, there are 2 without that designation. Unfortunately, if you want more parrots or bats in your world, you're not able to influence that, making it even more ironic that the advancement for breeding animals, the parrots and the bats, involves 2 unbreedable mobs.
Now, on their own, the villagers don't seem particularly fast, but that's just because we don't see them under pressure. As soon as a villager is under the panic of nightfall, these Squidwards can get some serious speed going, and in fact, they actually move faster than Steve's sprinting speed, which is definitely impressive, and if they move that speed all the time, maybe they wouldn't need golems.
By this point, I think we're all plenty aware that Mojang made Minecraft. I mean, it's kind of hard not to notice, but by chance you didn't, this secret might help you realize. As others have noted, when you look through the symbols on the end crystal, they can be rearranged to spell out none other than the studio's name, Mojang, and that's probably the coolest signature I've ever seen.
Within the game's code, Minecraft has a few hidden messages directed to the player, and the Suspicious Stew is a key example of that. See, the logic behind this edition was for the developers to communicate that lilies of the valley are actually poisonous in real life, which is nice to know, but it's not like daisies give regeneration in real life, so the message might not always come across.
The smithing table has been through quite a few changes during its short time in Minecraft. When it was first added in snapshot 18W44A, Minecraft's smithing table used to look like this. It's a sort of modified crafting table with some different tools along the side. I suppose it makes some sense. Back in 2014, ex-Mojang developer The Mog Miner was asked to include a tribute skin to a fan's rabbit named Toast, and after that feature was confirmed, this started the conversation for more rabbit varieties. And of course, this is where Twitter user 88Bully suggested including the killer rabbit from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, adding both a fun Easter egg and a terrifying way to go.
For anyone who's been playing Minecraft for a couple years now, you probably noticed something a little different about your beacons lately. As it turns out, as of snapshot 19W41A in Java Edition, you can no longer see the full beacon beam when you look up through it. Now instead, you're just gonna get these little particle effects along the side of your screen.
Sometimes it's possible for 2 hostile mobs to get angry with each other, and while I'm sure you've seen this happen with skeletons and zombies, 2 witches getting in a fight is a rarer sight. Though if this happens, it'll never end, since the witches both have healing options and resistances to the other splash potions. So if you get this happen, you'll have plenty of time to watch.
Of the list of words that the enchantment table can use, none of the words actually contain the letters J or Q, which is weird because even though they're not used in any of the words that show up, they do still have a symbol attached to them, which I guess makes sense. I mean, why are you gonna code in 24 letters of the alphabet and not do the other 2? While some Minecraft mobs are speedy, I feel like the bulk of them aren't all that fast. But have you ever wondered which one is the slowest? Well, the answer is the panda, though not just any panda, but specifically the lazy panda variant. Without using stats effects like slowness, this is the slowest possible land mob in the game, and seeing it in motion, I'd have to agree. Minecraft has its fair share of pet trivia. Whether that's the secret texture you get for naming a rabbit Toast or a good time with Scar's Jellycat, there's no shortage of real-life connections here. And Jeb has one of his own. As Lydia Winters confirmed, the Tuxedo Cat skin has a striking resemblance to Jeb's own pet cat, Newton, so if you have a name tag, you can pay tribute to that as well.
Items are supposed to go in hoppers, but what about mobs? Baby chickens are able to hide within hoppers due to how small they are. This allows you to place a block next to them for a compact chicken trap or put lava right next to them. Just hope that they don't move or you'll be having roast chicken tonight.
With the advent of bees in the 1.15 overhaul, Mojang gave us something new to put in our bottles. And while that's nice, there's a little detail here I can't quite understand. If you look at the 2 textures, you can see that a honey bottle is 4 pixels more full than a water one, which is strange, but maybe that's why we can't craft water blocks like so.
One of the main features of Java Edition 1.6 was the addition of hay bales. They were added in the snapshot 13W16A, where Minecraft's hay bales used to look like this. They were called hay blocks and had red bands visible on all sides instead of looking like the texture we know and love.
Unless we're talking about the secret killer rabbit, the bunnies in Minecraft are nothing to be afraid of. Though someone at Mojang disagrees, because when Ravagers were tested in snapshot 18W43A, these pillager monsters were afraid of rabbits, which is a fun Easter egg, but unfortunately, Jeb confirmed in a tweet that it was removed to maintain the beast's lore. Pigs and saddles are not a common form of transportation, and while they do allow for a hovering glitch like so, that isn't too practical. However, they do have one thing against their horse rivals, and that's the ability to go through 1-block spaces. Sure enough, if you're on a pig's back, you can ride the thing through a narrow gap like so. So if you're tired of crawling, I guess there's that.
You can't normally put a saddle on a baby strider. Mojang just didn't intend for it. However, if commands are used to saddle a baby strider and you try to ride the baby strider, you'll actually take fire damage because of how close your body is to the lava. The saddle looks really pixelated as well when equipped on one. They're really cute, so I guess it's unfair to make them work for you.
While Mojang has spoken out against adding certain modded features to the game, there is one notable exception, and that would be the 1.6 edition of horses. If you played Minecraft back in the day, I'm sure you remember the famous Mo Creatures mod, which, of course, had its own horses. From there, Mojang used these models as the baseline for the new horses, and just like that, a mod made it into the mainstay.
Sheep haven't always been the colours that we're all used to. In the 1.4 update, the colours of all type of sheep were changed, some of them pretty drastically. The light blue sheep looks completely different now compared to what it looked like back in 2011. They were made even more vibrant in the 1.12 World of Colour update.
Clearly, Minecraft's bees are an adorable addition, and it only takes one look at Twitter to see just how much the community loves these things. But have you ever wondered why they're so cute? Well, according to Mojang, they're specifically a half a block in size because the team considered that to be the cutest. And while I've never thought of it that way, it's hard to disagree.
Turtles turn into wooden bowls when they die from lightning. That's really sad. We can actually use this cruelty to our advantage to generate infinite bowls. All we've got to do is use a trident with channeling, hit a turtle, and harvest its shell. Or just, use a few planks and save some animals.
Clearly, in a game called Minecraft, you're gonna have a bunch of crafting recipes, which makes it all the weirder when some of them get removed in later updates. Take horse armor, for example. When initially added back in the snapshot 13W16A, they had crafting recipes like so, but just 24 days later, they were removed. So I guess we'll have to stick to Fortress Chest to get our supply. Gold tools aren't exactly known for their durability, or rather, they are, but not for good reason. But have you ever wondered just how bad they are? Well, apparently, it only takes one snow golem to find out. See, if you dig the snow under a snow golem's feet, your golden shovel won't even last 4 seconds before it shatters. And I know gold's soft in real life, but snow is too, so that just seems pathetic. On May 17th of 2019, Minecraft celebrated its 10th anniversary. And with that, if you actually happen to place a cake on that day, you'd actually see that the cake model was modified so that it would display a 10 above it made out of white concrete. It's a cute little birthday celebration, but honestly, who among us is crafting cakes anyway? When you're exploring in Minecraft, we all know to pack a bunch of food, yet somehow I still never seem to bring enough. And would you believe it, that was even worse in the beta versions of Minecraft, since back then, only the cookies would stack. And even then, you could only have up to 8 of them in a given stack. And thankfully nowadays, we've got much better pockets for our pork. Bats don't tend to get a lot of attention. After all, they don't drop anything, so we mostly just leave them be. But if you keep getting annoyed by these flying rats, there might be a reason for that. You see, between October 20th and November 3rd, these mobs spawn more frequently as a reference to Halloween. And that's cute, but the bats are still pointless.
If you've messed around with Minecraft's paintings, you've probably seen this before. And while the skull on fire is not only iconic, it also contains a neat detail. The background of the shot is actually a screenshot from Minecraft Alpha. And more surprisingly, a team actually found the seed from this screenshot and recreated it years later, which is some crazy dedication for sure.
If you don't yet have the flame enchantment on your bow, but you're still looking to fire off some flame arrows, then this might be an option. You see, if you have a lava bucket, that is going to be able to catch some of your arrows on fire, but not in the way that you would think. As you can see, only if an arrow shot into flowing lava does it catch on fire. Minecraft has plenty of rare things to see, but one that was particularly tough to find was a naturally occurring snow golem. Prior to snapshot 17W47A, there was a 1 in 5 trillion chance of a pumpkin either generating in a snowy biome, or an enderman placing a carved pumpkin like so to spawn a snow golem.
Shulkers are a downright pain, and we can all agree on that. But while they're not too friendly in the end cities, they're much nicer when you use these commands. By adding a shulker to a team, you can use it as a defense mob, meaning it won't attack you with your teammates, but rather use its projectiles on other hostile mobs. And that's a welcome change if you ask me.
Usually, when you see a skeleton, your first instinct is for fight or flight. But if you stop and look them over, you'll see this. In Java Edition, 89% of skeletons are right-handed, and the remaining 11% hold a bow in their left. And this emulates the estimated right-handed to left-handed percentage in the real world. And thankfully, there aren't any obsidian and bedrock. And because of that, I guess technically each dimension has some way for you to get an ender chest on your hands as well.
What came first, the pig or the creeper? Besides Steve and the removed human mob, the creeper is...
I'm a man of fortune, and I must seek my fortune.
is the oldest mob in Minecraft, but you might know the story of the creation of the creeper. The creator was trying to make a pig, but messed up the dimensions of the body. The pig is the oldest existing passive mob in the game, and technically the first mob intended to be in the game.
Roughly 8 years ago, on July 31st of 2012, Notch first hinted at the idea of a command block in his Reddit AMA. Here, when asked about more minor updates that the team was working on for the future, he mentioned that they might be working on some kind of script block, which, as you can see now, in reference to the adventure mode, turns out to be the command block. And even though at the time Notch said this idea might have felt impure for the game, all of us who have played with the different mini-games and command maps that have been made with this are definitely thankful. Gameplay changes, we also got a fair share of new fashion to see as well, a lot of which is pretty out there. But as the lead artist confirmed on Twitter, the idea of something crazy like a lily pad hat came from the 2018 fashion shows of Gucci and the like. And after looking at some of those runways, I think the villagers fit right in.
Mob spawning definitely has some quirks. For instance, even though mobs can't spawn on transparent blocks such as slabs and glass, piston head blocks work just fine. Now, this is not to be confused with the regular piston block. That part prevents mobs from spawning inside just like any other full block.
Diamonds are the quintessential rare item in Minecraft's overworld, but for a time, there was something even rarer. See, when they were added, cocoa beans weren't exactly renewable, meaning the only ones you could get were from a lucky exploration trip. And that, folks, meant that they existed on a smaller part of the map than the diamond ore. So I hope those cookies made were worth it. Sometimes, Mojang makes a change that doesn't seem all that important. And while there might be room for discussion on that, this one's hard to argue. See, prior to 1.16.2, Pufferfish 1 even gave the player a nausea 2 effect. But since then, it's only nausea 1. Though since the level in nausea doesn't impact the effect's potency, it really doesn't make much difference.
I'll go out on a limb and say that nobody likes to be poisoned, and even fewer people like to be lied to. So with those two facts, it pains me to say that Minecraft is doing both. Because apparently the Potion of Poison 2 has effects that last for 22.5 seconds, so the time says 22 because it rounds down. And now you have to live with that fact. I'm sorry.
Going hunting for the different ancient debris blocks that you need to make your netherite armor and tools is not an easy task. And while that journey might seem difficult, as it turns out, it's not even the hardest one in the nether. That's right, folks. It actually turns out that gilded blackstone is even rarer than ancient debris blocks. But if you're giving me a choice between one or the other, I'm definitely gonna take the less rare option.
If you've ever fought the Wither, you're familiar with its second phase. That being, when you see these particles, it's your cue to switch from a bow to a sword. Or it would be if we didn't have fireworks. See, by loading these into a crossbow, we can still damage the Wither with its armor, and that lets us finish the fight from a safe distance.
Arguably the weirdest Easter egg in Minecraft happens when you mix evokers and blue sheep. With those conditions, the wizard will cast a spell and change the blue wool to red instead, which is odd, but it's apparently a reference to another Microsoft game, Age of Empires, where the priest can turn enemy units into friendly ones. And that'd be why you hear this sound as well. It's from the game. As the lead creative designer, Jeb has a lot to say on what goes in the game, and apparently that can lead to some personal choices. So after Jeb's wife kept asking for a bear in the game, he told her that if they ever had a bear of their own, he'd add in the mob, which just so happened after the son was born. Polar bears were added to the game, and the son was named Bjorn for the Swedish word for bear.
Minecraft is synonymous with customization, so obviously the fireworks fit with that motif. But with all the different ways to deck out your rockets, have you ever wondered how many options we have to choose from? Well, apparently there are 2 to the 10,136 distinct fireworks to use. And that's more than the number of atoms in the universe, which is just insane.
Minecraft doesn't have a lot of flying mobs, and I think that's a missed opportunity. So to change that around, we can do so with the help of Elytras. See, with commands, you can actually attach Elytras to certain mobs, but it won't do anything until we set the fall flying tag to 1B. At that point, we can let them glide around and launch our first ever Minecraft mob airlines. Nowadays, shields are a necessity for PvP, but it turns out there's something even better, or at least there will be. See, in the separate combat test snapshots, Mojang currently has a change that will allow shields with banners to have more absorption, giving 10 instead of 5. And while this will likely be replaced with actual shield variants in the final run, for right now, a little banner goes a long way.
Pistons have a unique way of interacting with the blocks in front of them. Namely, if you have a piston push and pull a block like glowstone, it ceases to be a block for a moment and instead becomes a block entity. Because of this reclassification, that means a glowstone block momentarily does not give off any light during its journey.
Now, some of you might be familiar with this guy, the so-called rarest mob in Java Edition. And while this has been talked about before, have you ever wondered what's the rarest mob in Bedrock Edition? Well, as it turns out, the hardest to find mob in that game is a fully decked out baby husk riding a brown panda. So if you see it, get the camera.
You're short in Minecraft. Your hitbox is 1.8 blocks tall. An adult zombie's hitbox is 1.9 blocks tall in Bedrock Edition. An adult husk's hitbox is 2.01875 blocks tall. Oddly specific. Husks can't fit through a 2 block tall doorway in Bedrock Edition, but they can in Java Edition.
Perhaps you didn't know, but there's actually a way to find predictability in the way that Bedrock spawns. And using this information, people have made a program where you're actually able to see where the largest clump of bedrock appears at the topmost layer. And if you're curious, that's at X 21,783,512 and Z negative 800,011. What you're gonna do with this information, I don't know, but is it a fact about blocks? Absolutely. Because soul sand isn't a full block, when gravity blocks try to fall on top of it, they're just gonna get broken, which might not seem like that big of an issue, but it actually could be. You see, if you're in a soul sand valley and you want to clear out the lava, then this is not a complete way to get to the soul sand underneath. And yeah, unfortunately, you're not gonna be draining out the lava this way.
Every great artist tends to sign their work, and apparently Minecraft textures are no different. Though I wouldn't blame you if you never noticed the hidden autographs on the armor stand, since they aren't visible on any part of the item or entity. But look at the texture file, and sure enough, both Sarge and Jappa have their names right here on the bottom, hidden from plain view.
Clearly, fish don't do well on land. And if you drain out a nearby lake, then the best you'll be left with is a bunch of floppy something or others. Though, we could use that to our advantage. See, if you take a fish, or even a guardian, out of their natural habitat and put them on a slime block, then they'll keep bouncing up and up until they reach some serious height, even 17 blocks high in some cases.
We all know diamonds are a great resource to have, which is why it's all the more unfortunate that we can't farm them. Or at least we can't farm them like this. Because all it takes is a visit to a village to find yourself a renewable supply of all diamond tools, weapons, and armor. So you can't get infinite jukeboxes, but the rest is pretty much taken care of.
When hoppers were first added into the game, they initially only had a work-in-progress texture, but maybe not in the way you're thinking. Because as you can see, this only showed up when you had the hopper inside of your inventory. But even with that said, it is still pretty funny to walk around with a WIP just hanging around in your hand. While the invisibility potion effect makes you almost entirely invisible to different mobs and players, as it turns out, there's something in Minecraft a little bit more all-knowing. As you can see, if you have the invisibility effect and then you walk up to an enchanting table, then it'll still open up and the book will see the player.
When you create a fictional monster, you also get to make up your own terminology. So when you try to grab the dragon egg in the end, but keep getting interrupted by a group of endermen, what do you call that group? According to Dinnerbone, just as we have a flock of chickens or a drift of pigs, the collective noun is a haunting of endermen. A group of pandas is called an embarrassment, and that's a real world fact.
Now, despite what you might think, there's actually only one transparent block that cannot be placed on ice. Can you guess it? Well, if you can't, then it's actually snow layers that cannot be placed on top of ice blocks, which is likely some holdover from world generation. Health points are a weird thing in Minecraft. Like, why does the Wither in Bedrock have double the health of the Java version? But a weirder quirk of HP that you might not have noticed relates to the Iron Golem and the Neglected Giant. You see, even though the secret mob towers over the Golem, both actually have the same health of 100 points. The Giants can't even do that right. As soon as you hoe a dirt block and turn it into farmland, then all of a sudden you're not able to place ladders or torches along the side. But even though that's true, you still could do this with signs. As you can see right here, you can type your favorite message on it and it's stay on top of that farmland.
Bone meal is a surprisingly powerful tool, and as someone who doesn't like waiting, it's essential for me. But apparently it's more robust than even I thought. While we're all familiar with bone meal on the top of a grass block, it can also work from the sides and bottom. It'll even work if a plant is already on top, making this super substance even easier to use.
Game development isn't always a perfect process. Like, sometimes you go to code a pig and instead make a terrifying monster. And while it's a fun story, it's apparently not a one-off. In the development video for the Village and Pillage update, Mojang revealed that foxes originally looked like this whole mess. And now I'm both disappointed and relieved this never made it in the final version.
If you've ever worked with observers, you're probably aware that getting these blocks the right way round isn't always an easy task. Apparently, even Jeb had some confusion over this. The reason that observers have their current face texture is because Jeb kept forgetting which bit was the front, so this rejected texture was dug up as a solution.
If you've talked to a cartographer, you've probably seen one of these things. That being the coveted Explorer map for finding mansions and monuments. But while these look like regular maps, it turns out they work fairly differently. See, these maps generate based on chunk data, not on whether the player fills them out. Meaning if you got one of these and then left it at home, it'd still fill out just the same.
Render distance works in a couple of different ways in Minecraft. While most of us are familiar with the absolute render distance that refers to the blocks and structures in the distance, there's a separate entity render distance that exists. That's why shulker boxes disappear when you're too far away from them, because even though they're placed like a block, the game still classifies them as an entity.
Minecraft enchantments are a great thing, but they don't always make sense. And while it's weird to use a fire aspect book for light and TNT, I think it's even stranger that we can put mending on a carrot on a stick. But if you've got the levels, I'm sure the pigs appreciate it. Though I still can't get over the image of a regenerating carrot.
Unless you're a wandering trader, the invisibility potion probably doesn't get a lot of use, which can mean that certain uses go unchecked and sneak by in the code. Prior to snapshot 14W05B, if you hit a mushroom with a potion effect, its mushrooms remained visible. And it's understandable that Mojang would fix this for the effect to work properly, but it's quite fun to revisit.
As many of us know, beacon beams can't pass through solid blocks. But if you're worried that you can't use a beacon inside of the nether unless you go into the nether roof, don't worry. As it turns out, if you place a beacon underneath bedrock with no other solid blocks like netherrack in between it, then it'll actually blast through the bedrock roof, and look, you've got a fully powered beacon.
To speed up game development, it's nice to cut corners when you can, and Minecraft's textures have plenty of examples of that. But what's weirder still is which they decide to reuse and which they make from scratch. Like, the bucket of cod and bucket of tropical fish are recolorations, but the item sprites themselves are different, and I don't get why you'd only do half the assignment. Unlike their slime block counterparts, honey blocks are sticky along their sides. As the sticky situation achievement describes, sliding down the sticky side will slow your fall. So if you were to take a stack of 256 honey blocks and slide from the top of the world down to the bottom, it would take 1 minute and 14 seconds.
Crafting a netherite hoe is something of a joke, and the advancements call attention to that. But if you took the time to wear down the tool, you might notice it doesn't break the same as the others. And the reason for this is because tilling the soil is based on the server, so it doesn't display a break-in animation like the other ones. If you manage to break it, that is.
Spiders don't touch the ground, ever. We all know that they can climb walls, but it's physically impossible for them to touch the ground. Looking from the side in perfectly normal conditions, you'll notice that they actually float. I don't know why they float. Maybe the creators just didn't notice because of how tall the player is compared to a spider.
Although beacons do require obsidian to make, they don't actually require a diamond pickaxe to break. I know, that seems odd, and especially with a high-value item like this, you don't want to risk accidentally losing it. But sure enough, as you can see, if you use another pickaxe that isn't diamond, you're still gonna get the beacon back.
With so many items to collect, it's only fair we have some way to show them off. And while item frames are a staple in the way that we decorate nowadays, prior to this Reddit post, it wasn't even considered. But sure enough, just like the ender chest and the flower pot, item frames made it in through a community suggestion. And thankfully so, I might add.
Everyone knows that shulker boxes are a great way to carry around extra items in your inventory, but have you ever wondered how much? As it turns out, if you have 37 shulker boxes fully filled to the brim in your inventory, hotbar, and offhand slot, then those 999 stacks of 64 items are going to add up to 63,936 total items. If you've messed around with Minecraft modding, you know there are plenty of files to sort through, and hidden in those files are some sneaky details. For instance, did you know that axes were originally referred to as hatchets in the game's code? But since Java 1.13, the language files now reflect the current name. But since the axes are still one-handed, I can see it either way.
How would you classify a saddle? I mean, it's definitely a utility, but I wouldn't consider it armor. Minecraft, however, seems to disagree, since when you put a saddle on a pig, it counts as armor, but adds no protection. That's why you can see it when the pig goes invisible. But interestingly, the same doesn't apply to a horse, but only to horse armor. Weird.
Now, while everyone else searches for the 0.083% chance of finding a blue axolotl, there's one color that's even harder to find. As you can see when we watched the announcement for the Caves and Cliffs Part 1, there's a green variant that doesn't exist in the game. Why it was removed, who knows, but the emerald color would have been pretty cool.
Ender pearls can be a real lifesaver, especially when you're traveling in the end. Or they would be if I could get the angle right, but training that arc isn't always easy, though it turns out that ender pearls and snowballs can be thrown at the same range, meaning we can figure out our trajectory before losing any hearts. And that extra prep makes all the difference. Smelting items in a furnace can be a surprisingly good way to get experience, especially when partnered with cactus and bamboo farms to essentially automate the process. While those are good long term, if you're only going to smelt one item, the best one to put in the furnace is ancient debris, yielding 2 experience points for grabbing the netherite scrap.
When you toggle a piston between on and off rapidly with a gravity-affected block such as sand on top of it, then eventually the piston will actually break the block, which, there you go, can even be picked up as an item. Is it practical? Not exactly. You're way better using a slab or something. Minecraft has plenty of resources to craft with, but have you ever wondered which item gets the most use? Well, turns out the iron ingot takes the top slot at 34 crafting recipes, with planks falling right behind at 33. And while I would have guessed that those were the other way around, it's still plenty of a reason to get yourself both an iron and a tree farm in the future.
By this point, hoppers are an essential staple of Minecraft. Though if you've ever noticed an item traffic jam in your hopper pipeline, this might be why. A hopper can transfer 9,000 items per hour, or 150 items per minute. So if you have a really high efficiency farm, now at least you know why it got clogged up.
If you've ever tried to go through the hassle of learning how to play different note blocks, then you're well and aware that if you place a note block on top of specific blocks, then it actually makes a different instrument. So by that, what if you place a note block on top of another note block? Then it's going to produce a string-based instrument when you play it. Why you'd ever use it like that? I have no clue. The other note block underneath isn't able to play anything.
Minecraft sponges have come a long way. What used to be an unobtainable block that didn't soak up any water is now a treasure valuable enough to validate going to an ocean monument for. But as it turns out, this block was even less useful when Notch first added it. Originally in Minecraft Classic, the block would decay over time just like leaves. When the liquid system was reworked in InfDev, they no longer drained water. Clearly, up until the update Aquatic, this wasn't very high on Mojang's priority list.
Silk Touch is a valuable enchantment to have. So valuable, in fact, that many of us don't want to waste it, which is why shears used to be so great. See, prior to 1.9, we could enchant shears with Silk Touch, and then use that enchantment elsewhere. Meaning, if you build with a lot of glass, put Silk Touch on your shears, and instead you've got an unbreakable glass remover, which is cool while it lasted.
If you've played Minecraft PvP, then you're well aware of how impactful knockback can be. But while it's most useful there, Minecraft actually has a unique use for knockback in the base game. And it's for squids of all things. Apparently, hitting a squid underwater causes them to rise anywhere from a third to a half block, which isn't too useful, but now you'll know to look out for it.
Adventure mode is an interesting concept, but it's not a perfect system. For instance, say a playtester comes across a flint and steel. Well, without this tag, they can't spark fires or light nether portals, but they can still ignite creepers and TNT, and to me, that seems equally destructive, if not more so.
You can get up to 28 experience points from killing one large slime and all of the slimes that split from it. This will yield between 12 to 28 experience with an average of 20. 4 experience from the largest, 8 experience from the 4 it splits into, and 16 from the 4 tiny ones. You'll still need another 1,367 to reach level 30 though.
What's the right way to craft a bed? Well, nowadays the answer would depend on the color sheets you want, but in the past, all we had was the standard red. And with that meant we had a bunch of different ways to craft the same choice. In fact, between the 16 wools and 6 different planks, there used to be 3,456 ways just to craft this one bed.
Minecraft has its fair share of rare items. Turns out that there are even rarer names. In vanilla, there are only 3 items obtainable in survival with a magenta tinted name. Those being the dragon egg, the enchanted golden apple, and the thing banner pattern. And if you ask me, one of those things is not like the others. But if you have them, feel free to show off.
Do you ever wonder where Mojang gets their inspiration? I mean, since the designs are so simplistic, it's easy to lose track of the real-world parallels. Take the cow, for example. Apparently, this thing's supposed to be based off the Norwegian red cattle you can see here, but honestly, I don't see much resemblance. And if this is the case, couldn't they have at least matched the color?
Anyone lucky enough to get their hands on the Heart of the Sea item likely put it into crafting a conduit. But unless you fully powered it, you might not have seen that it's still there. When activated, the conduit displays a Heart of the Sea at the center of its model. Then when all 42 blocks necessary have been placed, the heart opens like an orange eye, as you can see here. At some point, I think we've all heard Minecraft's music discs, and even though some are better than others, they've each got a unique identity. And I'd say that disc 11 definitely fits that description. While it's a bit of a chore to listen to it all, you might not have noticed that it lasts for 1 minute, 11 seconds, and 111 milliseconds exactly. All of it absolutely dreadful.
Surprisingly, even though you're able to break your fall by falling on top of a waterlogged block, water-filled cauldrons are a different story. As you can see here, if we put side by side a waterlogged chest and a water-filled cauldron, one's gonna save you, and the other one doesn't make any sense.
Why don't wither skeletons carry bows like the others? Well, this might be our answer, since when we spawn in one of these with a bow like so, the skeletons start shooting fire arrows instead. And thankfully, the developers decided not to add another fire-shooting mob to the nether, but for a custom difficulty, this would fit right in.
Anyone who's ever used the composter block knows that it can sometimes be a ripoff, but as it turns out, it's not just you that it's ripping off. As a matter of fact, as soon as you put an item inside the composter, you'll see that the filling texture is the same as Podzol.
According to Mojang's official write-up, they don't currently plan to add in more community-made mods or features. But while that's true for now, it wasn't always the case. And in fact, the sound you hear here was actually inspired by a third party. While playing on the PvP server Project Ares, Dinnerbone noticed the high-pitched sound and added it into the bows we use today.
When you're talking about items, mob drops are sure to come up, but figuring out what those mob drops are is its own problem, and Notch definitely came across that. So that's why in the development stage for Java Edition, zombies used to drop feathers, and according to the developer, he didn't know what else they should drop. And it wasn't until the 1.8 beta pre-release that he finally got his replacement. While there are plenty of Easter eggs and secrets to see within the game, some also exist in the files themselves. For instance, take a look at this Elder Guardian. Not much to see, right? Well, that all changes when we go into the mob's texture file. Here, we can see that Jeb even signed the texture in the lower corner, so even though it's not visible in game, you can rest assured knowing it's there.
Even though barrels were first added to Minecraft Java Edition roughly a month before Bedrock in Snapshot 18W44A, in the files of a Bedrock Edition beta version lie some interesting unused textures. Apparently, at some point in development, there were plans to add variants of the barrel, both empty and filled with fish.
Of all of the mobs in Minecraft, there's only one that cannot trample turtle eggs. As it turns out, bats are the only ones that if they fly on top of a turtle egg, they're not gonna crack it. So for what it's worth, if you ever want to mix together your turtle storage with your bat farm, it's not exactly a workplace hazard.
Every now and then, Mojang add in a mob that's divisive, to say the least. Sure, the Phantom and the Glow Squid are famous examples of this, and while it's easy to blame these on community voting, they're not the only ones. Actually, there are 4 mobs that resulted from the community voting, those being the Glow Squid, the Phantom, the Goat, and the Fox. So hey, they're not all that bad.
Now, if you've ever played Minecraft during Halloween night, then you're well aware that some mobs on that day will be able to spawn with jack-o'-lanterns on their heads. As it turns out, there's actually 13 different mobs in the game that are able to wear this, which is good, because this is probably the only time you're ever going to get to see them. Throwing a splash potion is an exact science, and some of you likely know that it's better to land one of these on your noggin than it is on your feet. But it's the same true for bottles of enchanting. But when you test both ways, it's a myth. As it turns out, it doesn't make any difference where you throw these, so pick your favorite and it'll work just the same.
Getting a full set of 15 bookshelves is almost a prerequisite for getting an enchantment table. So obviously this is on your to-do list, but how much does it cost? After running the numbers, it takes 90 wooden planks, 45 leather, and 135 paper to make all the bookshelves necessary for a level 30 enchantment.
Throughout Minecraft history, the Jungle Wood door has been through a couple of different changes. As you can see, in 1.16, the current texture that we have when we have this in our inventory does not match up to the door when it's placed down. And if that inconsistency is going to bug you for the rest of the day, then don't sweat it, because in the 1.17 update, they're actually changing it in the snapshot.
Nowadays, ender chests stick out as the safest way to hide your diamonds and netherite, but their original implementation told a different story. In their first appearance during Snapshot 12W21A, every player on a server could access the same ender chest inventory. For a time, the safest option in Minecraft was the total opposite.
Arguably the cutest addition in the Caves and Cliffs update is the new axolotl mob. And while all of the colors are great, the blue variant is definitely the most sought after. And strangely enough, this is the only color that's not based off real life, but rather it was a suggestion from user Dark Ice Flame asking for an Easter egg to Mudkip from Pokemon, though I'd still say it looks more like Wooper. If you want to buff your crossbow, then a quick charge enchantment is a must-have. And hey, if you want more Minecraft facts, then the subscription's a must-have too. Thank you, by the way. But even with that, I wouldn't push it too far, because it turns out that quick charge level 6 and above pauses the animation on the first frame. Since the resulting reload time is now negative, the game can't even start the animation to load. But even if it could, it would take over 69 years to finish that. And at that point, your opponent's probably moved on. If you can get your hands on a Totem of Undying, it's an invaluable resource to have, but it does mean we give up an offhand slot to make it work. Though, for what it's worth, the 3DS version of Minecraft lets the Totem work in any of the hotbar slots, since there's no offhand feature in that version, which is nice, but I'd rather stick to PC.
Beds in the nether don't exactly mix well. That's just intentional game design. Though that's unfortunate, since it turns out beds might just be what you need for nether safety. Of course, you can only test this in the overworld, but when you sleep in a bed, the player cannot be damaged by lava. When you wake up, you might not be as lucky.
Back in 2014, Microsoft famously purchased Mojang for a chunk of cash. So while we're all familiar with the Windows 10 version of Minecraft, did you know that there were Minecraft versions of Windows 10? Sure enough, 5 updates for Windows 10 were codenamed Redstone, which is cute, but I'm not sure it's worth $2.5 billion for that reference.
Wolves love bones. After you've managed to tame a wolf using a few bones, you'll likely put them away and not use them for a while. But if you get the bones back out and show them to your tamed wolf, it will tilt its head in the same way as it did before it was tamed. Tamed wolves can't even accept bones, but still love them just as much.
If you've been lucky enough to get your hands on a blue axolotl, you know these things are a tough find. I mean, with a 1 in 1,200 chance of finding these water wolves, it's definitely gonna take some time. But there's a reason for that. You see, even though blue axolotls don't exist in real life, that 1 in 1,200 number comes from the approximate number of axolotls that are still left in the wild today. We've talked before that a splash potion of harming is a valuable asset to have, especially against armored foes. But even if it is strong, it's not exactly a one-hit kill, or at least it isn't with us. Though if you were to land a direct hit with a harming 2 potion on a cave spider, that's just enough to finish it off. But even with that trick, I'd rather just take out the spawner and be done with the whole thing.
Minecraft's apples have a bit of a weird history. For starters, the original texture wasn't even for Minecraft, but rather a previous game by the game's creator called Legend of the Chambered. And while that texture was changed in the texture update, that's not the end of this guy's association with apples, since to this day, if you kill him, he'll drop an apple with his other items.
As of 1.16, the current longest name for a block is Polished Blackstone Pressure Plate, which is actually tied for Cracked Polished Blackstone Bricks, both of which being 34 characters long with spaces and 31 without. But of course, this is excluding the Education Edition, because there, it's not a fair competition. Clearly, TNT can pack quite a punch, but what can do in damage here gets even more serious when we add it to a cart. As it turns out, all it takes is a direct hit from 3 merged TNT minecarts to take a full diamond armor player right down to half a heart. And though other methods can deal more damage, I'd rather just spend the ingots and get this cheap fix.
You don't have to play creative mode for long to come across these spawn eggs. I mean, there's a lot of them. But while we're familiar with how they look nowadays, they didn't always seem that way. In fact, back in the snapshots of 1.1, they were each sourced from one file that was tinted for the variations. And I'm glad they decided to change.
Unfortunately, the Bedrock Edition doesn't allow for all items to be held in the offhand, but that doesn't mean every offhand item has a use. Take the Nautilus shells, for example. For us, they do nothing in either slot, but the reason they work like this is because the drowned mobs have to hold them like so. So it is useless, but it's at least a fun detail. Landing a shot with a bow and arrow is easier said than done. However, it looks like the game might be partially to blame. See, if you were to stand close to a wall and fire off several shots without moving, you'll notice that the arrows fall slightly to the right of your crosshair. And if you change to left-handed in the settings, it's the opposite, which I guess makes some sense.
When chains were added to Minecraft, they brought around a lot of discussion, but one topic that doesn't get talked about enough is their blast resistance. Even though chains are made of less iron, just 2 iron nuggets and an ingot, they have the same blast resistance as a full block of iron, proving once and for all that it's never about the amount of iron, but how you use it.
Now, it's not news to anyone that Bedrock Edition has its fair share of quirks. And even then, this still might be the weirdest installment I've seen. As you can see, if we use this summon command with the tag OnTame, then we can get a glitched out red wolf. And while our colors do match well, unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to tame it.
Basically, everything in Minecraft has more of a use than the furnace minecarts. And for this reason, Mojang explicitly didn't add it to the Bedrock and 3DS versions of the game. Jed even mentioned removing them outright from the Java edition. So unless they decide to make these trains actually usable, it's only a short while before this joins the forgotten ranks of Beast Boy and Frog Girl.
The game rule for mob griefing is a powerful tool, and while most of us associate this command with regards to creeper explosions and enderman theft, that's not the only limits. As it is, if you switch this command to false, you'll find that foxes can no longer pick up items, which I guess makes sense, but something tells me that holding a shulker box is nowhere near as much of a problem as a creeper detonation. In Bedrock Edition, it's entirely possible to relight an unlit campfire just by lighting yourself on fire. No joke, by going over and stop, dropping, and rolling right on top of an unlit pile of ashes, all of a sudden it's lit up like a Christmas tree. Now the only question is, why doesn't this happen in Java Edition? I guess we handle fire safety a little different around here.
Well, crafting a stone cutter instead of a crafting table does seem more expensive. When making stairs using a stone cutter, it requires just 1 block per stair crafted, where a crafting table costs 1.5 blocks per stair. For things like cobblestone, this doesn't seem to make much of a difference, but for harder to obtain blocks such as quartz and prismarine, the savings add up quickly.
The Ender Dragon holds a lot of importance to the Minecraft world, but while most of us spend hours just trying to find and kill the thing, have you ever bothered to learn its name? Because yeah, according to Notch and Dinnerbone, she is actually named Jean, with a question mark at the end and everything. So if you're ready for that first name basis, then by all means.
If you've ever had a physics lesson, you've heard that gravity, in theory, accelerates all objects at the same rate. In Minecraft, however, that's verifiably false. To test this, if a player stands on a stack of sand or gravel, and then the stack falls onto a non-solid block like a torch, then the player will fall fast enough to go through the stack and even take enough damage to die. Obviously, Minecraft has plenty of quirks that don't make any sense. But even after the community has pointed these out, new ones rise to the surface. As an example, even though blazes do not have